They don't just leave you, they leave you, and then they rewrite you. In their mind, the story doesn't end with your absence. It begins again, with a version of you that fits their fear. A version where you were too much, where they were never enough, where love was unsafe, and leaving was survival. Because for the avoidant, truth is unbearable. Truth means admitting they pushed away what they wanted. Truth means facing the ache of losing love they secretly craved. Truth means they hurt you and themselves. So instead, they rewrite the ending, not because it's accurate, but because it keeps them safe. The story they tell themselves. When you walk away, the silence isn't empty. It's crowded, crowded with whispers, crowded with memories, crowded with stories, but not the story that happened, the story they tell themselves. Because for the avoidant, memory isn't just memory, it's survival. They don't just replay what happened, they reshape it, they bend it, they edit it, until it feels less threatening, until it feels safe. Avoidants live in tension, a constant tug of war inside, one rope pulling them toward closeness, the other yanking them back toward safety. Every step toward intimacy feels like stepping onto thin ice. One wrong move, and they imagine the ice cracking. The weight of your love feels heavy. The possibility of disappointment feels heavier. So they back away. They retreat. They pull into themselves. But when you leave, it doesn't feel like relief. It feels like exposure. Like someone ripped the curtain open. Like the world can now see just how much they cared and how badly they mishandled it. So what do? They defend. Not with arguments. Not with fists. Not with loud declarations. But with stories. Stories that make them. The calm, rational one. And you, the emotional storm. It starts subtly. Maybe they wanted too much from me. That one thought acts like a bandage over guilt. It doesn't sting as much. Then comes another. Maybe I was never really in love. That one is like ice on a burn. It numbs the ache of missing you. Then the sharpest one. Maybe walking away was the smartest choice I ever made. That one isn't just a story. It's a shield. A way to breathe again. But notice something. These aren't just thoughts. They're edits. Edits that keep the pain manageable. Edits that make loss feel like victory. Edits that let them pretend they're in control. Because control is everything. Imagine this. You gave them love. Steady love. Patient love. Even the kind of love you had to stretch yourself to give. And at first, they accepted it. But then, it started to feel heavy. Not because your love was wrong, but because their nervous system doesn't know what to do with steady love. To them, love means risk. Risk means vulnerability. And vulnerability feels like danger. So when you finally walked away, their mind couldn't sit with the truth that they cared, that they lost something real, that their fears sabotaged it. So they flipped the script. Instead of admitting, I was scared of how much I cared, they tell themselves, you just cared too much. Instead of admitting, I wasn't ready for love, they tell themselves, you weren't the right one. Instead of admitting, I panicked when I felt close, they tell themselves, I saw the red flags from the start. It's not cruelty. It's not malice. It's survival. Because shame to the avoidant is not just a bad feeling. It's annihilation. It's the sensation of their entire identity crumbling. So they avoid it at all costs. And the easiest way to avoid shame is to reframe the story. Let me give you some scenarios. You cry in front of them. Your tears were honest. They came from love. You wanted them to see you, to meet you in that depth, but they couldn't. And when they replay that moment, they don't think, wow, they were so vulnerable with me. They think, they were too emotional. Rewrite. Another scenario. You ask for reassurance. Not every day, not in desperation, but in those tender moments when your heart needed a reminder. And instead of remembering, they cared enough to want closeness. They'll think they were too needy. Rewrite. Or picture this. You walked away with dignity. You didn't chase. You didn't beg. You gave space. And when they remember, they don't think. They respected themselves. They think, they didn't love me enough to fight for me. Rewrite. Each rewrite isn't about you. It's about what their nervous system can tolerate. Because the truth would crush them. The truth would sound like this. I did love them. I did want them. But I was terrified. So I pushed them away. And now they're gone. That truth is too raw, too sharp, too unbearable. So their brain bends it, softens it, twists it, until it no longer cuts. And here's the paradox. The more they cared, the harsher the rewrite. If you were just casual, there would be no need to spin the story. But if you reached into their soul, if you touched the places they keep locked away, then the rewrite has to be brutal. It has to erase love. It has to erase connection. It has to erase intimacy. Because admitting it would mean admitting their deepest fear, that they do need, that they do long, that they do love. So what looks like coldness is really self-protection. What looks like denial is really survival. What looks like rewriting you is really rewriting pain. You may hear it through others, friends telling you what they said, mutual circles passing comments. They said you were too intense. They said it was never that serious. They said they knew it wouldn't last. And you sit there thinking, how could they say that after everything we shared? But understand this. They're not trying to humiliate you. They're trying to protect themselves from drowning in the truth. This is why breakups with avoidants often feel so confusing. You know the connection was there. You saw the glimmers, the rare softness, the way they held you when they forgot their fear. But when it ends, they act like it was nothing. That's not reality. That's rewriting, a survival strategy disguised as indifference. The silence after you leave is not empty. It's a battlefield. Their heart whispering one story. I love them. Their mind screaming another. I didn't. And whichever story keeps them safest, that's the one they'll believe. Even if it's a lie, even if it erases you. That's why you should never measure your worth by the story they tell themselves. Because the story isn't about you. It's about their fear, their wiring, their survival. And if you can hold that truth, you'll stop asking, why did they rewrite us? And you'll start seeing, they had to. Not because the love wasn't real, but because it was. The avoidant doesn't just remember you. They reconstruct you. They don't just recall the relationship. They rewrite it. Memory, for most people, is already unreliable. For the avoidant, it becomes a tool, a defense mechanism, a survival strategy. When you leave, their nervous system feels exposed. Abandonment is one of their deepest fears, but so is intimacy. So they do something strange. They change the meaning of the story, not because they're cruel, not because they want to hurt you, but because this rewriting keeps them safe. They have to convince themselves that they didn't really lose something precious, that they didn't sabotage something they secretly wanted, that they're not the reason love slipped through their hands. So the rewriting begins. At first, they downplay the relationship. They tell themselves, it wasn't that serious. I wasn't that invested. I never really needed them. This is the first layer of rewriting, a shield against grief. Because if it wasn't important, then it can't hurt. If it wasn't deep, then they don't have to feel the loss. But here's the paradox. The harder they try to dismiss it, the louder it echoes. Your absence becomes a kind of ghost, one they can't ignore. And so they shift again. They begin to critique you, to magnify your flaws, to highlight the conflicts. to remind themselves of the moments you stumbled. This isn't about you being unworthy. This is about them needing to soften their own guilt. If they can convince themselves that you were too much, or too demanding, or never satisfied, then they don't have to face the harder truth. That maybe they were the ones who couldn't stay. That maybe they pushed away the very thing they longed for. This rewriting isn't just memory, it's survival. Because taking responsibility would mean opening to pain, to regret, to vulnerability. And that feels unbearable. So they rearrange the story into something that feels safer. Something that lets them breathe without drowning in self-blame. But deep down, their body knows. The nervous system stores what the mind tries to erase. The ache doesn't vanish. It shows up at night, in dreams, in random moments when your name surfaces in their thoughts, in songs that bring you back without warning. The rewriting buys them time. It numbs the sting, but it can't silence the truth forever. And here's where it becomes even more complicated. As time passes, the story shifts again. They begin to wonder, to second guess, to replay the what ifs. What if I had tried harder? What if they really were the one? What if I just threw away something I'll never find again? This is the avoidance quiet torment. They can't admit it to you. They won't say it out loud to others. But inside, they wrestle with these unspoken regrets. The rewriting flips again. Now, instead of minimizing you, they idealize you. You become larger than life, not as you actually were, but as the one they imagine you to be now that you're gone. They inflate the fantasy, and the absence deepens the longing. But because they never built the tools to stay, the longing feels unbearable too. So once again, they rewrite. They swing between extremes. You were never right for me, and you were the only one who ever understood me. Between blame and idealization, between dismissing and yearning. This is the cycle of the avoidance memory. It's not stable. It's not grounded. It's a constant rewriting to manage unbearable tension. And you, unknowingly, become a character in their story. A story rewritten over and over. Not to honor you, but to protect them. The question is, what does that do to you? If you've ever heard an avoidant describe the relationship after it ended, you may not even recognize yourself in their version. You may think, were we in the same relationship? Because their memory isn't memory. It's survival strategy disguised as narrative. But here's the important truth for you. Their rewriting doesn't change reality. It doesn't erase your worth. It doesn't diminish the love you gave. It only reveals the lengths they'll go to avoid facing themselves. This is why closure with an avoidant often feels impossible. Because they're not holding the same version of the story you are. They've rewritten it to protect themselves. And that rewriting leaves you feeling unseen, unheard, invalidated. But don't mistake their rewriting for truth. It's a reflection of their fear, not a reflection of your value. It's a mirror of their wounds, not a statement about who you were to them. And the deepest irony? The more they rewrite, the more the original story still bleeds through. Because no matter how much they edit, the body remembers, the nervous system remembers, the quiet ache remembers. And when they're alone, when no one is watching, the truth slips through the cracks. They loved you. They wanted you. They just couldn't let themselves stay. That's the story they'll never write down. The one they'll never say out loud. But it's the one that lingers beneath every rewrite. Rewriting doesn't stop at memory. It spills into identity. For the avoidant, telling themselves a new story isn't just about you. It's about who they get to be after you. They don't simply edit the past. They reshape the present. In the future, when you leave, they are left with two unbearable truths. The first, that they wanted closeness more than they admitted. The second, that their own defenses pushed it away. Those truths feel like poison, so they rewrite. This time, the rewriting takes the form of identity. They shift the way they describe themselves. I'm better on my own. I was never made for relationships. I need freedom, not attachment. It sounds like confidence. It sounds like clarity. But beneath the surface, it's armor. It's a story that protects them from having to confront loss. And yet, there's a catch. Because identity isn't just self-talk. It leaks into behavior. It shapes how they live. So they pour themselves into distractions. Work, hobbies, casual connections. Anything that doesn't require depth. Anything that convinces them they're not missing you. But even here, the rewriting is fragile. Because the busier they get, the louder the silence becomes when the noise stops. When they finally put down the phone. When the project ends. When the friends go home. The quiet returns. And in that quiet, so do you. So they rewrite again. This time, by redefining you in ways that justify their withdrawal. They may tell themselves you were too much. That you demanded more than anyone could give. That your love was overwhelming. Or suffocating. This rewriting turns your presence into the problem. Not their distance. Not their fear. You. It's easier for them to believe you were the weight, rather than admit they were the ones who ran. But here's the paradox. Even as they tell themselves this, their body remembers something else. The warmth, the laughter, the comfort of being seen, the moments when they felt safe, even if only for a breath. That memory doesn't vanish. It gets buried, rewritten, disguised as indifference. But it lives in their nervous system, and sooner or later, it seeps back through. This is why avoidance can look so contradictory after you leave. One moment, dismissing you. The next, circling back with sudden curiosity. Because the rewriting doesn't stay stable. It bends. It flips. It cracks. And under those cracks, the truth leaks out. The truth they don't want to face. That losing you hurt. That pushing you away wasn't freedom. That the story they told themselves doesn't match the ache they feel. So the rewriting grows more elaborate. They may even tell others a version of the story that protects them. She was too needy. He just wasn't my type. I never really felt connected. To outsiders, it sounds convincing. To them, it feels safer. But to you, if you ever hear it, it feels like betrayal, like you were erased, like your love didn't matter. And that's what makes this rewriting so cruel. Not because they hate you, not because they want to hurt you, but because they need to protect themselves from themselves. Every rewrite is a shield against self-confrontation, against the shame of seeing how much fear cost them, against the grief of realizing what they let slip away. And so they keep telling stories that distort. But here's the strange thing. The more they rewrite, the more the real story haunts them. Because the truth doesn't disappear. It lingers. It echoes. It resurfaces in the smallest triggers. A scent. A song. A place you went together. A memory they didn't mean to stumble into. And in those moments, all the rewriting falls apart. For a second, they remember clearly. The love, the closeness, the moments they swore didn't matter. The moments that mattered most. And it breaks through their defenses like a crack in glass. That's why avoidants often come back later. Not when you're waiting, but when you've moved on. Because the rewriting can't keep the truth buried forever. Eventually, the story bends so far it snaps. And they're left with the raw reality they tried to avoid. That they did love you. That they did lose something precious. That they can't rewrite away the imprint you left. This is the hidden cost of their rewriting. They spend so much time avoiding pain that they create more of it. For you. For themselves. For anyone who tries to love them after. Because until they stop rewriting, they can't start healing. and the story will keep repeating over and over with every person they push away. But you don't have to stay trapped in their version. Their rewriting may have erased your role, but it doesn't erase your reality. You know what you gave, you know what you felt, and you know the truth they couldn't hold. That your love was real, that your presence mattered, that their fear, not your worth, was the reason it ended. The rewriting was never about you. It was always about them. And the greatest act of freedom you can take is to stop rewriting yourself to fit into their story, to claim your own narrative, the real one, the one where your love had value, where your effort mattered, where their inability to stay wasn't proof that you weren't enough. It was proof that their fear was stronger than their courage. And no rewriting can change that truth. But rewriting doesn't only happen in their mind. It happens in the way they live after you. Because once the story is reshaped, behavior follows. And this is where the rewriting shows its clearest cracks. At first, it looks like independence. They might seem energized, focused, even thriving. They throw themselves into work, into projects, into friendships that demand nothing deep. On the surface, it looks like growth, like they've moved on without hesitation. But beneath the surface, it's not growth. It's avoidance wrapped in productivity. Their calendar fills up not because they love life, but because silence feels unbearable. Silence exposes the truth they don't want to feel. So they stay moving, stay busy, stay surrounded by noise. But here's what most people don't see. The rewriting eventually starts to bleed into their choices. They begin seeking out people who fit the new story. If they've convinced themselves you were too much, they may chase someone who seems low maintenance. If they've told themselves they don't do relationships, they lean toward casual, temporary connections. If their rewrite was, "I need freedom," they find someone who won't ask for closeness at all. It looks like alignment. It feels like relief. But it's not intimacy. It's repetition. It's a way to confirm the story they're clinging to. And yet, even in these new connections, you linger. Not because they want you to, but because rewriting doesn't erase attachment. The nervous system doesn't obey the story. It remembers the imprint. And when someone new doesn't bring the same spark, or doesn't mirror the same safety you once offered, the avoidant feels the gap. They may not say it out loud, but they sense the absence. They compare silently. They measure without meaning to. And the rewriting begins to wobble, because their new story was supposed to protect them from pain. But now, the contrast brings it back. The distance doesn't feel like freedom anymore. It feels like loss disguised as independence. And that's when the avoidant faces a quiet panic. Because the rewriting isn't working. The story they've been telling themselves doesn't match their reality. They may double down, convincing themselves harder that they were right to let go. Or they may spiral, oscillating between blaming you and missing you, between dismissing you and longing for you, between insisting they're fine and feeling anything but. And here's what makes it so complicated. They rarely show this to the outside world. To others, the story remains polished. I'm better off. It wasn't right. They weren't for me. But in private, the cracks spread wider. The quiet hurts louder. The rewriting begins to betray them. Because every story built on denial eventually collapses under truth. And truth doesn't need an invitation. It waits. It seeps. It returns in ways they can't control. A dream where you appear unexpectedly. A sudden urge to check your social media. A wave of emotion when they hear your name. Each one disrupts the rewrite. Each one confronts them with the gap between their story and their reality. And that's when they often make the strangest move of all. They return to you in subtle ways. Not always with words. Sometimes with silence that hovers near your life. liking an old post, watching your stories, reaching out casually with a "Hey, how have you been?" It's never framed as longing. It's never framed as regret. It's disguised as casual. But underneath, it's testing. Testing whether the story they told themselves still holds. Testing whether you still feel the same. Testing whether they can step closer without being swallowed by their fear. And here's the paradox again. Even in these moments, they're still rewriting. Because if you respond warmly, they may tell themselves, "See, I wasn't the only one holding back. They're still here." If you don't respond at all, they may tell themselves, "See, I was right to leave. They never really cared." Either way, the rewriting bends to protect them. But no matter how much they rewrite, one truth keeps resurfacing. That losing you wasn't about you being unworthy. It was about them being unready. And deep down, they know it. That's why the rewriting feels endless. Because you can't build peace on denial. You can't construct healing on distortion. At some point, the story stops working. At some point, the rewriting becomes exhausting. And when that happens, the avoidant stands at a crossroads. Either keep spinning the story tighter, or finally face the truth. That truth is terrifying for them, because it means admitting vulnerability, admitting grief, admitting the love they buried wasn't fake. It means undoing every layer of protection they built. And avoidants rarely do that until the cost becomes unbearable, until the weight of pretending outweighs the fear of feeling, until the silence hurts more than closeness ever could, until the rewriting no longer shields them, but traps them. And that's the hidden reality of their process. Rewriting may protect them from pain in the moment, but in the long run, it creates a deeper kind of pain. One that doesn't fade, one that lingers, one that follows them into every new connection, every lonely night, every memory of you that refuses to stay buried. And that's why many avoidants live with a tension they never resolve. The story they tell themselves versus the truth their heart won't forget. And no matter how far they run, that truth waits, patiently, silently, relentlessly. There comes a moment in every avoidance journey where the rewriting runs out of road. They can spin the story in 100 directions. They can tell themselves they never cared. They can convince themselves you were too much, too needy, too wrong. They can insist their freedom mattered more than connection. But eventually, the story starts to echo back at them. Empty, hollow, unconvincing. Because here's the truth. A nervous system can't be tricked forever. Your presence left a mark, not on the surface, but deeper, in the place where the body stores memory. That look you gave when you understood them without words. That laugh you shared in the small moments no one else noticed. That safety they felt but never knew how to accept. All of it lives in their body, and no rewrite can delete it. They may try to drown it in noise, but silence always brings it back. They may try to bury it under casual connections, but intimacy refuses to be replaced. They may try to erase you with indifference, but longing has its own clock, and that clock doesn't stop ticking. For some avoidants, this truth hits quietly. They find themselves thinking about you on a random Tuesday. Your favorite song comes on, and suddenly, they're back in your car, hearing your voice sing along. They smell something in the air, and it transports them to a memory they never meant to keep. It's small, it's subtle, but it shakes the rewrite. For others, the truth hits like a wave. They see you moving on, smiling in a photo that doesn't include them. They hear you've met someone new, or worse, they realize you've stopped checking on them entirely. And suddenly, the distance they swore they wanted feels like the very thing they can't bear. That's when the rewriting crumbles. That's when the story collapses under its own weight, because they can no longer deny it. They did care. They did love you. They did lose something irreplaceable. And now, they're left with a truth they don't know how to carry. Here's what's important to understand. Avoidants rarely come to this realization with a dramatic confession. You won't hear them storming back, declaring love in the way movies script it. Instead, it shows up in quiet, almost invisible ways. Checking your social media, hovering near your life without stepping inside it, asking mutual friends about you, but never daring to ask you directly, reappearing casually, with excuses too thin to hide the weight beneath them. Because their fear doesn't vanish with awareness. Even when they know they loved you, fear still binds their hands. Fear of rejection, fear of exposure, fear of needing someone they once pushed away. So instead of admitting it, they often sit with it. They carry the truth silently, like a weight they can't drop. And here's the cruelest part. By the time they fully realize it, it's often too late. Because avoidance spends so long rewriting, that by the time the truth finally breaks through, you've already built a new chapter. You've already stitched your heart back together. You've already learned that their silence was not proof of your unworthiness, but proof of their fear. And maybe you're already gone for good. That's the hidden cost of avoidance. Not just the loss of love in the moment, but the haunting that comes later. The regret they'll never admit out loud. The longing they carry in private. The realization that what they buried wasn't the relationship, it was themselves. Because when they pushed you away, they weren't only rejecting you, they were rejecting their own capacity for closeness, their own ability to be seen, their own chance at love that could have healed them. And that is the truth their rewriting can't protect them from. They will always know it. Maybe not consciously every day, but in flashes, in memories, in silence, and in the ache that comes when they realize you weren't the problem, you were the possibility, and they lost it. So what does this mean for you? It means their silence never defined your worth. It means their rewriting was never the truth of who you were. It means the love you gave wasn't wasted, because it left an imprint, not just in them, but in you. You loved deeply. You showed up honestly. You risked vulnerability in a way they couldn't. And that's not weakness. That's strength. That's courage. That's proof that your heart is alive, capable, and deserving of someone who won't run from it. The avoidant may never say the words you wanted to hear. They may never apologize, never confess, never admit what they lost. But you don't need their words to validate your truth. The fact that they're haunted by you is not your closure. Your closure is knowing you were real in a world where they pretended. Your closure is realizing you don't need someone to rewrite your story, because you're the author of it. And when you step into that truth, you'll see something powerful, that every time an avoidant rewrites, you're free to write something new, something true, something whole. And that is where you win. Not by waiting for them to come back, not by hoping they'll finally admit what they feel, but by knowing, deep down, you don't need them to, because you already know. You already lived it. You already loved. And that was real. And now, so is your future. So if this spoke to you, hold it close. Let it remind you that what broke wasn't your worth. It was their capacity. And if you're ready to keep growing, to keep healing, to keep choosing the kind of love that doesn't hide, stay with me. There's more to uncover. There's more to say, and you deserve to hear every word.